This is the Decoding Obesity podcast, where we simplify, demystify, and decode obesity, helping you lose weight and feel great. So gear up for a fascinating journey through this ever-evolving field, and let's see what we find. And please remember that the thoughts and opinions on this podcast do not constitute medical advice. Don't forget to visit our website, www.decodingobesity.com, for show notes and more info. And now, here's your host of the Decoding Obesity podcast, Dr. Avishkar Sabharwal.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Decoding Obesity podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. I'm pleased to welcome back Dr. Angela Fitch, who was here with us recently. She's a board-certified physician in obesity medicine, internal medicine, and pediatrics. She is currently the Associate Director of the Massachusetts General Hospital Weight Center and a faculty at the Harvard Medical School. She is also the current Vice President of the Obesity Medicine Association. Today, she is wearing a different hat. She has been able to successfully lose a substantial amount of weight and has been able to keep it off successfully as well. Let's dive into her story. Welcome back, Angela.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So nice to have you back. So let's talk about your story. When did your weight really become an issue for you, and when did you really become aware of this problem?
So I was always really athletic growing up. So I started very early just doing gymnastics. I was never very good at it, but I don't know how I got into that. My parents sort of sent me to gymnastics and I did it. But like I said, I wasn't very good. So I stopped pretty early with that. But then I would play, soccer a little bit. And then when I got to middle school and high school, I ran track and I played sports, but I was always bigger, right? I was always because I had been a gymnast, I was always pretty muscular. And I'm just kind of built that way. I'm kind of German and Norwegian, and I'm just sort of a little bit stocky, if you will. That's what I always thought of myself as. I never was, I'm fortunate that I never struggled with real pediatric obesity like we see today in some of our patients. Right. The only size in clothes, for example, that I ever remember is being like a size 12 in women's. So I never remember being I was never a 1 or 2 or 4 or 6. I just remember being like a 10 to 12, and that's where I had to shop. I never got to go to the stores where they had the tiny clothes. And so, I just thought of myself. I never had a body image issue, thankfully, but I have a lot of obesity in my family. And looking back on it now as an obesity specialist, I recognize that of my family, I was probably, the lucky one, if you will. I was able to be active enough or be engaged enough in other types of, I like to cook, I like to, eat healthy, where sort of, it wasn't that the rest of my family didn't like to eat healthy, but growing up in Iowa, which is where we grew up, we were used to eating, shake and bake chicken in the oven and potatoes, and it was a very meat and potatoes sort of family, and peanut butter jelly sandwiches and things like that. So it wasn't really, there wasn't a lot of high-end cooking or anything going on unless I was
no gourmet cooking.
No gourmet cooking. But no, it's great though. I mean, like I said, it was a very positive environment. It was never a negative environment, but I was never very thin. So I guess the story goes that, when did I struggle with my weight? I think as I went into college and then went to work for a while. I worked before I went back to medical school. And then when I got in medical school, I think was when I put on quite a bit of the weight. And then throughout residency too, I think the night shift and, eating lots of peanut butter and cracker at the nurse's station at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's not very good for us the way we used to do medicine training.
Right.
And then I really, I guess, gained a fair amount of weight when I was trying to have children then. So then that was in my late 30s. And I had repeated episodes of miscarriages and sort of back-to-back struggle with that. And in doing so, I would, put on 10 pounds or so in that first trimester. And then I would not lose it when I then did it again, so that by the time I was done with all that and I was 40 years old and I had my first child, then I was, up around 200 pounds. So I had sort of crept up from sort of where I remember myself being in the 130s, when I was like in high school, up into the sort of 200 range, post
Wow.
pregnancy now, like 20 years later.
Wow. Wow. And so what all did you try for that prior to actually being successful?
So I did, the traditional, because I was a internal medicine pediatric primary care physician. And again, that was my first part of my career for the first 10 years while I was, going through this time of trying to start a family as well. And, we took call overnight. We admitted 4 or 5 patients a night to the ICU at our local hospital. In addition to other patients, we were admitting to the floor.
Sure.
So it was a very busy primary care practice. So during that time, there wasn't a lot of focus on self-care, I guess is the point. I was sort of establishing my practice and I was working a lot. And so I would do general exercises outside. We lived in Minnesota. We would cross country ski. We would
Wow.
go skiing a lot. We would, go walking around the lake. But I never was really intensive with it, from a standpoint of I'd go to the gym, I'd go to classes, go to the YMCA and I'd go to boot camp. That was my favorite,
Right.
class to go to with weights, et cetera. So I was working out 3 or 4 times a week. And then I would usually just track calories
I
essentially,
see.
so, we never really learned a lot about weight management. I mean,
That is true. I
we
don't think we learn anything now either.
we trained ourselves, right? I mean, we
Right.
kind of like, when I was in the primary care practice, that's how I got interested in obesity medicine because people would come in, they'd say, well, how do I lose weight? And I'm like, I don't know. Good question. Right. Like, um, go to Weight Watchers. Why don't you do this app, and try to see how many calories you're eating, right? It was a very much a calorie in, calorie out sort of
Right.
discussion. So I would try to do that myself, basically, because I'm like, oh, I should be sort of doing what I'm telling people to do, right?
Right.
And I'd be mildly successful. I'd lose 5, 10 pounds, which is pretty good, right? Because if I'm 200 pounds and I lose 10 pounds, that's 5% of my weight,
5%. Correct.
right? But see, I think in general, right, society has this misconception, like I did too when I was part of society, if you will, that I could do more, right? That I wanted to I wanted to go back down to like 140,
Right.
right?
There's
Which
there's
was,
always this gap between the expectation and the reality.
yeah, right. Because 140 is 60 pounds. Like I have these conversations with my patients all the time. Right now, I'm like, so 140 from 200 to 140 is like 60 pounds,
Right.
right? So that's 30% of my weight.
That's true.
Like,
That's a lot.
and so I mean, I really have to have surgery if that's what I'm going to do. Now, granted, even at 200 pounds, I was not at a level that would qualify for surgery, right?
Right.
So, being my height what it is, my BMI was still in the 30s. So it wasn't at low 30s. So it wasn't like I
That's so
certainly
true.
qualified for that. But if I want that, how can I get there, right? Like I was thinking I could just do it with diet and exercise,
Right.
and I would do a little bit of it, but I never really did anything until I started taking medication. So that was
Right.
really what changed my mindset is when I started to become an obesity medicine physician. And I recognized the importance of obesity as a disease, as you're talking about, on your podcast. I mean, the fact that obesity is a disease means that a lot of times we need medication to make it better,
That's true.
right? And it wasn't until I started taking medication that I was able then, combined with my lifestyle efforts, I did sort of step it up a notch because I got a Peloton bike. I'm a very big Peloton fan. That was very early on in like the first year that they were out. So before they became
Wow.
famous, because I was struggling, to exercise, to get to the gym, because of my job, right? And being busy and then having a small child on
Right.
top of that.
Yeah, I think that's a very common theme that we see. Your health kind of takes a backseat early on in your career, and that's where things just start falling apart.
Mhm.
And you have to kind of take that into account and then step back and see how you can make things work out for you because health is so important.
Right. But I think a lot of people do this, not just in medicine, right? I mean, I see a lot of patients that their job, is really sort of, killing them. Like I've had patients recognize even with COVID right now, one of my patients, she's doing a great job and she's like, well, I guess, she was working like 3 jobs, at one
Wow.
point, because of whatever, finances, et cetera. But she recognizes she hasn't been working these other jobs because the other jobs were in the industry sector, entertainment sector, like
I see.
restaurants and at the TD Garden, which is the where the Celtics play. So she was working, doing that kind of on the side, right, on top of her other job, like her day job. And but she recognizes how much how much now she has more time to devote to her well-being. And so we do have to really think about that, I think, is how much do we want our job. I mean, I remember having that conversation with myself, even like, I don't want my job to kill me.
I think the other thing, the other aspect of this is the fact that while your job does make you money, the amount of money that you'll spend later on in your life taking care of yourself when you're sick is going to be much more than what you would have made. And we don't account for that fact because that's in the future. That's not happening in the present.
Right, which is what I think a lot of us struggle with that. That's technically called delayed discounting, right? This idea that you can see something in the future
Right.
that is worth more than what you're doing today. And a lot of people, just in general, we don't have good feelings around delayed discounting. We want it now. We rather take $5 now than take $20 at the end of the month because we want the
Right.
$5 now, if you will. And so that's really something we all have to talk to our patients about, but also ourselves, about what is it really worth, right? And that's not something that, I'm no psychologist, but I know enough about delayed discounting that it's not something that a lot of people are just naturally gifted at. My
True.
husband
That's
is
true.
he's naturally gifted. He's the epitome of delayed discounting. Like he's always waiting for the future, but saving for the future. But I'd rather have it right now type of person. And that's the personality. But the key is that you can train yourself, though,
That's true.
to appreciate that delayed discounting, right? And that's where we have to help patients to develop some of those, tools like that they can then train themselves, how to manage that or how to value that.
That's true. Did you ever reach a point where you just gave up? You were like, I'm not going to lose weight. And how did that make you feel?
Yeah, it's very defeating, right? Like I am a fan of, I read Yanni Friedhoff's blog. He, is a obesity medicine physician in
Right.
Canada.
Yeah.
And he said something really prominent in an article he wrote for something recently, one of the publications online or something, one of the magazine articles, if you will. The best weight you can achieve, because patients always ask us like, well, what weight should I be? Or what's my ideal weight? Or what should I be, right? Your ideal weight is the weight you can achieve and still live a happy life, right? Or I might be paraphrasing it a little bit, but I thought that was very profound because you have to balance that with what you want to live with, right? Like, I
True.
mean, I might want to still, I was able to lose, about 35 pounds, with my interventions, right? But it's work to keep that off, right? And of course, I'd like to lose more. I'd still like to be the 140, that's in my mind, right? But I recognize that to get there, my job would have to be a Peloton instructor. I'd have to work out. Like, I mean, the thing is that I was looking at one of my Peloton instructors and the workouts they do, because, during COVID, they weren't videotaping in the studio because the studio was closed. And so they were posting on the website a lot of their workouts that they were doing. So you could follow and do the same workout that day, right? Well,
I
one of my
see.
instructors, he works out like 4 hours a day. Like
Oh
he's
my
got
God.
this workout and then that workout and this workout on the same day, right? I'm thinking that's like a week, like what? But he does that, and but again, this is the point, right? This is what he does for a living. He's got, probably, I don't know, 8% body fat, 10% body fat, right? Like,
That's
I
true.
mean, to get there, to be that, right? It takes that amount of effort. You don't get there with my, hour workout four
And
times
you
a
have to
week.
realize that's his job. So he's doing his job.
Yeah.
You cannot have everything at the same point in time. You have to strategize and prioritize what's important for you.
Right. And you have to, but you have to recognize then that you don't have to give up. I think for some
Right.
patients, they think of that, like you said, as sort of giving up. I don't think we should ever give up. But at the same time, I think we have to recognize, what interventions we're going to need if we want to accomplish that goal, right? So if I really do want to be 140 pounds, then I need to really step it
Right.
up a notch, right? And decide I'm not.
Yeah, and there's a difference between being, say, like for you being 140 pounds versus you being at a healthy weight, quote
Yeah,
unquote.
right,
So there's a difference because it doesn't
right.
have to be 140 pounds for you to be healthy
Right. And that's
metabolically.
right. And that's the other thing, right? Is that when you look at it too, this is the discussion I have with patients all the time too, because I reached this nadir, at around, I got down to around 158. That was kind of my lowest. And then I kind of went back up a little bit again. But interestingly, I went back up by about 7 pounds. But interestingly, my body fat percentage is still the same. So, I'm still like at 30% body fat, which is normal,
Right.
right? So,
Right.
even though I'm 165 pounds right now, my body fat percentage is normal. So I have to appreciate that at some level, you have to sort of deal with that. I mean, I have some muscle, right? Because
That's
that's
true.
just the way I am. I'm very compact. I have I think I always forget, right? I think it's type 2 muscle fibers, right? I'm not an endurance athlete. I am a sprinter. That's what I
I
was
see.
a sprinter, and I was a discus thrower and a shot put
Wow.
because I had strength. I was the only one that had strength.
Wow.
So that was what I did back then.
And did obesity affect your relationship with food at any point in time?
So I've been very fortunate that I don't really let it affect my relationship. In other words, I feel like food should be nutrition, right? And food should be enjoyed. I don't think I don't think anybody should be on a diet. I mean, we get a lot of criticism in different communities, we meaning in weight management. I think you should live into a lifestyle that you can live into, right? And I think that should be something that works for you. And so it just so happens that the things I do to try to manage that work for me, right? I'm okay with having a protein shake for breakfast and having a shake for lunch sometimes or a bar for a snack at the office because I don't have time to go grab something, or I didn't pack or I didn't plan. So my strategy is to use meal replacements, for example, so as not to just go hungry and then come home at night and then I'm going to be scrounging around for something when I get home and crackers and cheese and
Right.
it's just going to not be a healthy situation. So I've been very fortunate that I've been able to do this, with a good balance between physical activity, sleep, prioritizing my sleep, and a healthy, well balanced, because I was always eating pretty healthy. I mean, it wasn't like I was going out to eat a lot or getting fast food or any kind of super processed food. I was just, I don't know. I just was, my family, my brother struggles with severe obesity,
I
and
see.
he always did, even when he was 10 years old or even younger than that. I can remember when I look back, when he was 6, 7, 8 years old, he started to struggle with obesity. I didn't recognize it, of course, back then. I mean, I kind of did, but it wasn't like it was something, that we tried to fix back then. It was sort of this thing where we always thought he would outgrow it, right? Everybody told us, oh, he's just because he's also super tall and he was really good at football and he went to
Mm.
college and played football because he was on the line, so he had that sort of thing going for him that he, was using his weight a little bit to his advantage back then, and being successful with those things, but it took a toll on his body, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
so he really struggles, right? So if you look at us together, you'd be like, oh, wow, like I'm the lucky one that I didn't struggle quite as much, thankfully.
And did obesity ever have an effect on your relationship with yourself? And did that change once you kind of started losing weight?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy, right, to get sort of down on yourself for various reasons, whether it's work or again having a family, and whether or not you're able to do that or not, and everything that happens to us. It's easy for us to get kind of, I think, down more than it is, be happy, right? I
Yeah, I
mean,
think we're our worst critics. I
yeah,
mean,
right, right. So you don't want to be in a bathing suit or I mean, there's just a lot of like I said, I was fortunate. I never really had a lot of body image issues necessarily, but it wasn't like I would sometimes, say, oh, I want to be like that, right? I would look at people and go, I'd rather look like that. But again, that takes a lot of, I was in the best shape when I got a trainer. That really, that was even before my Peloton. I got a trainer. I owe a lot of my recent transformation to her.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because I actually asked another guest this. How important do you think was a trainer for you? Because
so important.
For me, I've kind of never been able to justify the cost of a trainer.
Okay, so it is. So I tell patients this all the time, because it is so worth it. I mean, a lot of people literally just can't afford it. I mean, really, It is costly. So we recognize that a lot of our patients, they just really don't have means to do that, right?
Right.
But it was the best thing I ever did, because I had never done it either. And I got into it through a friend of mine, a colleague that was going to this person. And she's like, oh, you should go see Allison. And I'm like, okay, sure. But again, so I'm this person, right? And I had to recognize this. I'm a person where I don't do it unless I have an appointment. It's not something, even though I like to exercise, meaning I was always an athlete in high school or junior high, I don't really like it. Nike had a reason for putting on their slogan, just do it. Right? Because you just have to do it. I mean, It's not fun. It's not. And then the sort of no pain, no gain thing, right? I mean, it hurts. I mean, it hurts to exercise. It doesn't hurt. It shouldn't hurt when you're exercising, right? You shouldn't have localized knee pain, but you're sore.
That's true.
There's a fallacy too. There's a big fallacy that after you work out for a while that you're not sore anymore. Oh no. You still get sore every time. I go see Allison, I couldn't walk the next day. Even though I was in super good shape, right? Because if you work out enough, you actually, break down your muscle fibers. I mean, this is what's good for you. You're a little bit sore.
True. That is true. Yeah.
And so you do have to kind of cope with that, right? But what was really good is, so there's actually some data that shows that you get 30% more efficacy from working out with a trainer.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There's a 30% bang for your buck, if you will. So if you're exercising for an hour a day, but you're doing it with a trainer, it's really 90 minutes or whatever.
Oh, wow.
Right? Or not
That's
quite,
amazing. I should get a trainer probably then.
Yeah, because to me, it's somebody who, and then that's when I got my Peloton, right? Because it's a virtual trainer.
Right.
Because again, it's somebody, I have to have somebody, I do these workouts, I am dying and drenched in sweat. I mean, literally the other day, the first time ever, I had sat up on the bike because it was a little break time. You have these little episodes where you can kind of take it easy for 30 seconds.
Right.
And so I sat up instead of being kind of hunched over, and the sweat was dripping off my bike, even though I wasn't touching the handlebars. Usually I'm on the handlebars and the sweat's dripping off because it's coming off of my arm and, onto the floor. But this was the first time I've ever seen it. And I was watching my handlebars and I saw the sweat.
Oh my God.
Dripping, even though I wasn't holding on. So it's a big workout, right? I would never do that by myself.
Did you ever try any of the other programs, the ones by Beachbody and whatever have you? They have so many programs. Did you ever try those?
No, I don't know what it was about. I don't know. And I was never a spin person. I'd been to one spin class literally, and I hated it. And then I bought the Peloton. Right. So I was my husband's like, are you sure you're going to like this? He's like, it's going to become a clothes hanger. It's going to sit there all the other equipment. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do this. I don't know what it was about it, but it's been transformational for me. That and my trainer and the Peloton. And I lost my trainer when I moved to Boston because she's in Cincinnati. And that was probably I really have gone downhill just a little bit since I don't have her. So I really do recognize
the importance of a trainer.
Yeah, she's because somebody pushes you. I tell patients all the time too, I'm like, Michael Phelps has a coach. He doesn't need a coach. He could coach anybody, right? True. When he's swimming, he could be a coach. He could be a swim coach. I mean, he could coach the high school kids, college kids, right?
That's true.
But he has a coach because he wants to get better, right? So we have to have coaches to get better, whether that's...
I think you need another person to recognize what you're missing to kind of perfect that part of your skill set.
Right. And whether that's a dietitian or obesity medicine physician or nurse practitioner or health coach or trainer, right? All these people, psychologists that we have, all these people are are coaches, right? And they're teaching you how to move forward, right? And holding you accountable and pushing you, because otherwise, like I said, I wouldn't do that same workout. If you gave me an exercise bike and just told me to do 60 minutes on it, I would just pedal and
Whatever,
watch
yeah.
like Game of Thrones, and just be pedaling.
I
That's
think,
what I would
yeah,
do.
I think the other part is also the accountability part of it. But for some
Yes.
reason, when I was doing my residency, I was back in India. I was working out like crazy, but I didn't have a personal coach. I was fairly successful. I was working on like 2 hours a day, but I was motivated internally to do it, and I could never justify the cost. And
Yeah.
because of that, even now, I'm not able to justify the cost for some reason. But I think I definitely need a personal trainer, which I probably will get at some point in time.
Yeah, I think it's totally good. And now again, with all the virtual stuff, it's been quite nice, that people are able to, do it virtually. I was able to connect with my trainer again virtually in Cincinnati because she started doing that, and I
Do
mean,
you
she wasn't
think
doing it
there's a
before.
difference? Do you feel a difference between the virtual and in person, or it's about the same?
No, I think it's less virtually because it's not, she can't I'm not quite as accountable. Like, in other words, I'm going to work out a little bit harder when I'm there in front of somebody, like when I'm right there with you, right? Like in the gym, right?
Right, right, right,
Versus,
right.
and I think I do that even if I'm like in the gym, so there is a little bit of that like personal piece that I think isn't as good with accountability, with virtual.
Right.
But it's better than, I think, like I said, recognizing the key for me was recognizing some of these things. And it took me a long time. But now I actually miss it. Like if I'm not exercising, like if I'm not able to get on my Peloton because we're on vacation or something, I
Yeah.
actually miss it. And I never was like that before.
Yeah, that used to happen to me. Once you get into that routine, it's a part of you, it's a part of your daily routine, and that's why you kind of start missing it if you're not doing it. But again,
Exactly.
if you don't do it for a very long time, you'll start missing that part when you start doing it again. So you
Yeah.
kind of have to keep doing what you're doing, what's right.
It's hard. And I tell patients that all the time, and myself, right? I mean, it's hard. It's hard to maintain that weight and and nobody wants to take medication, right? Or have surgery. It's not something anybody says, please just sign me up for some medication and surgery. I mean, nobody picks that. People want to be able to do things sort of
Right,
on their own, right? We all want to have that, that natural, sort of way about us, right? But if you recognize that if you can do that and you can, be in a different place and how much better that is for you. Like when I was heavy, I was getting hypertension, and my family has a history of hypertension. And my dad had a heart attack and triple bypass when he was 50, and I was getting
wow.
close to 50. So that was when my transformation sort of happened. I'm like, I'm going to be 50 and fabulous. That's what I said. It
It's
actually
very important
started.
to have a positive mindset also.
It is, right? And that is so important, right? We have studies on that. There's studies to show that if you have a positive mindset, you do a lot better, with weight loss, which is also, I think, why medication is also somewhat helpful because,
Right,
it helps to reinforce, like you get more weight loss, right? And so when
right.
you get more weight loss, you get more weight loss because you're
True.
more motivated or you're just able to do it better.
And anyway, medicines, even though we prescribe them for patients still have to have those lifestyle changes to go along with it. They are not a substitute for the lifestyle changes.
Right. But I think, recognizing that you can do that and take a medication and
Right.
get more results from it. I tell patients that because they'll say, I don't want to be on a medication. Well, I'm like, well, nobody does. But if you can
True.
be, 40 pounds lighter, if you can be one of the people that are fortunate enough to lose 20% of your weight or greater than 10% of your weight, and you want to get there, right? You're 200 pounds and you want to weigh 170, that's going to be 15% weight loss. Let's get there,
And
right?
who knows, if you lose that weight, you come off, say, your antihypertensives or your anti-diabetic medications. People may be able to do that because these things get reversed.
Right. And I was motivated too because I had mild sleep apnea,
Wow. Yeah.
So, I mean, my doctor did a sleep test just because I was getting some hypertension,
Wow.
and recognized, that she's like, do you snore? I'm like, yeah. My husband says I do.
So how did you manage to get the success?
So so it all started in an airport. What airport was it? So I'll call out our current president of the Obesity Medicine Association. So Craig Premack and I were in an airport heading home after one of our conferences. Like I said, I can't remember which airport it was. I want to say it was, where was our conference several years ago? Anyway, I'll have to go back to, I'm trying to think of what that airport looked like. But anyway, we were in the airport getting ready to leave. We both were on similar flights and happened to be in similar sort of gate areas, right? Which is rare, in airports like
Right.
that. And we were sitting there and I said, I really want to lose, because the next conference is like in the spring or whatever, so that's like 6 months or something,
Sure.
right? I'm like, I really want to lose 30 pounds by the next conference or 25 pounds or something by the next conference. And he goes, I want to lose weight too. He goes, let's do it together. Should we be accountability partners? And I'm like, and by this time we had gone off in the airport. Like, I think maybe he had to go to a different gate or something. But anyway, we were texting each other. He's like, do you want an accountability buddy? And I'm like, sure. He goes, and he texted back. I said, that's a good idea. We'll hold each other accountable. He goes, we'll text each other each week. He's like, you don't have to tell me your weight. He was like worried, like he didn't want, like you don't ask women what they weigh, sort of thing, right? He's like, you don't have to tell me what you weigh. Just tell me if it's up or down. And I'm like, I don't care if you know what I weigh. I said, it's better for me if you know what I weigh.
Right.
Like that I can be more accountable, right? I'm
Yeah,
going to tell you.
Yeah, and I think you raise a very important, a very valid point that even though the trainers may be very expensive, but even if you have an accountability partner, anybody can be your friend, a family member can be an accountability partner.
Right.
That also helps because you have somebody to hold you accountable to at least take that step.
Right. So once a week, we said on Monday, we would text each other, like up or down or what we weigh or whatever. I actually went one step further. I did my body composition on our body composition scale. So I would text him my like printout, from my body composition scale each week. And so we would, just go back and forth. He'd be like, good job. Or I'd be like, how you doing? Whatever. And then I started taking Saxenda.
I see.
And I found that to be very helpful for myself. And it was just a world of difference. Like I have patients that tell me this too, and I can experience that too. People all the time tell me, like I had a woman today tell me, oh my gosh, I never knew what it felt like to be full. And I'm like, that's totally me. I was always kind of a volume eater. Like I would just eat a little more I would eat off my son's plate, right? Like I'd finish my plate, but then I'd pick his leftover broccoli or leftover chicken or whatever. I would just, for either mindless reasons or I don't know why, but, maybe I was still hungry. I think I would always eat, a little bit larger volume than probably I should. But with Saxenda, it was amazing. I would go out to dinner sometimes or out to eat with friends. I had some, different friends throughout my lifetime that were relatively lean people. And like we'd be at lunch and they'd be like, oh, I'm finished, and they'd move their plate away and it was like half full. And I'd be like looking at it going, oh, I'll eat that. You want that? Like, can I have that extra piece of bread or whatever you're not going to eat on your plate? So I think that, all of us have that different fullness, that trigger, right? Of that I'm full. And for some people, it happens very early and they're very fortunate. They can be like, oh, I'm full and just leave half of the plate, and there's the rest of us that are like, eat the whole thing and then get a couple bites more. But taking Saxenda really made me, feel full. And I was like, this is good.
Did you ever try any of these supplements over the counter that are available? And what's your opinion on these?
Yeah, I never really tried any over the counter stuff in my my journey. I tell patients all the time, we have so much better data on the actual medications that we have, both safety data and efficacy data, that I'd rather you take something that's actually going to work, versus something that might not work and is costly. A lot of these things cost
and they're not regulated
$60.
because they're labeled as supplements, so they're not regulated. So we don't really know what's in them.
Exactly. And so I tell people, I'd rather you take something. Now, I do believe, I was actually, when I was at the University of Cincinnati, I was on integrative medicine faculty. And I'm very much a believer in, using different things, in different ways. There is some data, for example, on cinnamon and insulin resistance. And
Right.
so I did have a patient the other day. I had a girl, a 12-year-old that, her family was rightfully reluctant for her to take metformin. And even though, we know it's very safe, but it's a medicine, right? And
Right.
people have to get to that point in different ways. And even though we had the discussion about it, and she clearly had acanthosis, she had a high fasting insulin level, so she had some reasons for us to believe too that she might benefit from something that's going to help her insulin sensitivity.
Right.
So she's the mom was like, is there something we can do? Something else we can do? I said, well, you can take some cinnamon. It actually helps with insulin resistance if you want to give it a try. And there's some, like I said, there's some data on that. Not a lot of good weight loss data, but
Right.
a lot of these supplements, it's hard for them to get weight loss data because it's hard for them to do that,
It's hard to standardize
study.
and do the study.
Well, and
Yeah,
fund it, right? Because to do a weight loss study takes a lot of patience.
that's
I mean,
true.
well, not just patients, like, but a lot of people, in the study to show the difference, to be powered substantially to show a difference, in weight loss of 5 to 10%, you have to have quite a big study, and to have a cinnamon company fund, that 1 year study or 3 year study, like some of the Saxenda and Benjamin Topiramate and some of the other studies we have,
Right.
it costs a lot of money.
That's true. What do you do now to keep a check on your weight, especially in the holiday season and during celebrations? That's the tough one, right? That's when you just kind of see things. You see cookies and you see cakes and whatever have you, and you're like, let's live a little.
Yeah, so like I said, I do live a little. I do then, I do think that I'm fortunate that because I've worked into such a nice routine of exercise that I've been able to, we have some data to show that exercise helps with weight maintenance,
Yeah.
more so than weight loss. And so I'm fortunate that because I do that, I can have, you can, there's the old saying, you can't outrun your fork, right? So you can't just overeat and then exercise, but it does give you a little bit more leeway. I mean, I don't lose the weight, right? If I was being more disciplined 100% of the time, and there are times when I am more disciplined and I might, be able to get some more weight loss when I'm paying more attention to my eating plan.
Yeah, I think I remember reading it somewhere actually, that people think that people who are suffering from obesity do not have willpower, but it just takes a few extra bites,
Yeah,
and it's and that's the end of it, right? So
right.
you may have the willpower to stop yourself for whatever amount of time, but then at some point in time you tire out,
Yes,
and
and it's
that
really, and I say to people, it's really about, and Bob Kushner, I like Bob Kushner's thing. He says it's about skill power, not
not
willpower,
willpower. Yeah,
right? So you need to learn the skills of trying to manage that, which is really, is really cognitive behavioral therapy and understanding, what choices you're making. And like we said, delayed discounting, right? And recognizing that, so what you have said before, how do I manage it? Well, I let myself have these episodes, but then the next day I might just have a protein shake for breakfast
that's true.
and one for lunch again, and
And
sort
that's the
of,
other thing to kind of realize, that it's a continuum. It's not that one day you had a heavy meal and that's the end of it. It's a continuum. You
right.
can,
So then you can kind of, again, you can't just go hog wild and then make up for it.
right.
You shouldn't be sort of, starving yourself, if you will, for these
That's
other
true. That's
episodes.
true.
You don't want to promote, binge eating, but at the same time, you kind of have to do that, right? You have to, I tell people it's like spending money. It's about the whole week or the whole month,
That's true.
not about like one day, right?
No, yeah,
So,
what I meant was like in terms of the holidays and whatever, you know that you're going to have, say, a family meal or say on Thanksgiving or whatever, but you
mhm,
plan accordingly for that particular meal.
right,
And it shouldn't be a daily affair that, okay, I'm going to have a feast for dinner, but the rest of the day I'm not going to be eating whatever,
yeah,
unless you're doing intermittent fasting, which again is kind of different because the feast should still be a healthy meal. Doing intermittent fasting doesn't mean that you can eat whatever you want to eat.
right, and that's, I have been sort of doing some of that recently to see what that does, just to sort
Yeah,
of.
it's interesting because I was doing it till a few months ago, and it was very interesting because till then I never realized that hunger would come in waves and just go away. And that's what you realize when you start doing intermittent fasting, that it just comes for a little while, it goes away, then it comes back, goes away, and after a while it'll just come back and it'll just stay. Then you'll be hungry, and then you know that it's time to eat.
Yeah, and that's what our psychologists teach people, is how to ride the wave, they
Ride
call
the
it,
wave, yeah.
right? Ride the
Yeah.
wave of hunger and sort of let it go and see if you can get past it, because it is something that you have to try to manage, right? That skill power, not the willpower, but these skills that you have, right? So like I'll tell people all the time, it's like same with cognitive behavioral therapy. You have to kind of, like, I gave this example once of how, I had a protein shake at home, a smoothie that I made, and I had a coffee. And I was driving into work, and I didn't sleep very well the night before for whatever reason. I was stressed out. There was a lot going on at work. And I was driving into work, and by the time my drive was like a half hour, by the time I get to where I work, I'm like, oh, I need to stop at Starbucks because I need another coffee. Like, it was a bad day. I
Right.
need another coffee. So I'm stopping at Starbucks, and of course I'm like, oh, I should get a pastry because I deserve a pastry, because it's been a bad week and it's my birthday this week, right? Was my birthday. So I'm like, all these things are going on in my head. And this is all within a, 2-minute span of getting off the exit, right? Like, I mean, this is like not a long conversation. It's like, I'm just getting off the exit, and instead of driving to work, I'm going to drive through Starbucks in the drive-through.
Wow.
So I get in the drive-through, and I'm like, oh, because they have my favorite almond croissant. They took it off the market, thankfully, but which was great because I can't even get it. But it was delicious, almond croissant from this bakery in San Francisco that they would ship them in all over the country, right? I mean, they're
Right.
just
Yeah.
delicious. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to get that almond croissant. And then I'm going to get I'm going to get like a macchiato, right? Caramel macchiato.
Wow.
I'm not just getting a regular coffee. I'm getting So I'm driving up, there's a line, and I'm thinking, I really shouldn't do that, because I'm trying to lose weight. I'm doing the delayed discount. I'm like, but what is it worth to you? I'm like, is it really worth it? I'm like, yeah, it's really worth it because it's been a bad week, and I didn't sleep, and there's some bad stuff going down at work. And so I'm like, okay, so finally I get up to the window, right? Get up to the ordering thing, and I order it. Now, there's still like 2 cars before you get to the actual window, right? And I'm
Right.
thinking to myself, oh, I ordered it. Maybe I should just tell her I don't want it when I get to the window. I'm like, what does she think if I say I don't want the croissant even though I ordered it? Anyway, so no, I take it, I go. And then by the time I get over to my office, right, I say to myself, I think to myself, I had the shake this morning, I had the coffee with some half and half. I have this macchiato, which of course the calories are there at the Starbucks. I see,
Right.
I added
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like 800 calories, right? That
Wow.
I've consumed, and it's only 8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my
And
God.
I'm thinking to myself, I just had 800 calories, and it's only 8 o'clock in the morning. And so, but instead of beating in my past life, I would have beat myself up about that, and I would have
Right.
said, that's horrible. And so for lunch, I would have got pizza, at the cafeteria, or I would have got, French fries and a cheeseburger or something, or
Yeah.
I
It's
would have
time to
gone
throw in the
out.
towel or whatever.
Yeah, throw in the towel, right? But then if you think about it, I would have then probably racked up like 3,000 calories that day, right? If I just threw
Right.
in the towel. But instead I said, you know what? This was really enjoyable. This is my favorite croissant. It's my favorite drink. I really enjoyed this. This is really good. Now, the rest of the day, I'm going to, so for lunch, I had a protein shake and a salad. And for dinner, I went home and we made salads with chicken on the grill, and that's what I had for dinner. So the point is that I was able to sort of flex it and enjoy that moment still and not feel bad about it, but still come out, relatively with the same number of calories at the end of the day, right? It didn't have to go out the window.
That's true. And actually, one of the things that I've myself tried, and it's been successful for me at times, not always. I don't always give in to my desires, so to say, of the croissants and whatever have you. I love croissants, by the way. I love their plain croissant with butter, man. That's amazing. That's like the best thing. But what I've realized is that there have been times when I just talk to myself. I'm like, this is not worth it. And you keep debating in your mind till you have that croissant in your hand, or till you have that coffee in your hand. But there have been times where I've just thrown it in the dustbin.
Oh, yes, that's what I do too. So I told that story too to patients one time in a talk. is that like I will be classically, you'd go to Panera and they'd
Right.
give you the free cookie because you had this reward card. And I
Right.
would go to Panera for lunch because I had a Panera right by my work. And I would go there because I was able to get out of work and just get away for a little bit, get outside. And they'd say, "Do you want a free cookie?" And again, I would sit there and go, "I don't really need a cookie, but it's free. Like,
Yeah.
how do I know?" So then I would take it home or take it back to the office, and I would break it in half, and I would just eat half, right? And then I got to the point where I would throw the other half in my trash can. But one time at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I busted that baby out of the trash can. That's
Oh
how
my
bad
God.
it was.
Really?
Well,
Wow.
it was like a clean trash can. It was just my little trash can in
Wow.
my office, right? It was just in a bag. Essentially, I had just
Right,
bagged it
right,
up.
right, right, right.
you know,
No,
for,
so for me, it just that debate ends when I just throw it in the trash can. So like I'm
well,
walking outside or whatever, and if I have that piece, I'm debating whether I should eat it or not, whether it's worth the calories for me or not. And then once it's in the trash, it's done. That's it. That debate is over.
well,
So it's a done deal.
so then I had to learn. So then what I would do after that experience is I would break the cookie in half at the Panera and throw it in the trash can there.
I see.
So I
Yeah.
wouldn't go back and get it out of a public trash can, obviously.
Yeah, it's
but
because once it's out of your mind, it's done. Because otherwise, if you can see it that debate is going to keep going on, and it's actually very distracting.
right, and that's the thing that's the strategy I guess when you asked earlier, what strategies is I tend to try just not to buy it, like I mean for home at least, and not have those types of things around and because otherwise if they're here
Absolutely.
I'm gonna eat it but I just have to recognize that and maybe like you said buy a smaller portion or I'll just throw it out or I'll just
Yeah, that's when the mental debate ends. Once it's out and it's gone, that's the end of the mental debate. You know that, and then you feel actually happy about it. You're like, I did the right thing. So
yeah,
you
plus you
don't feel
enjoyed.
sad. Yeah, and you don't
Yeah.
feel sad. Like even if you eat half a cookie and the other half you threw away, you would actually have enjoyed the half cookie that you ate rather than having had the full cookie and feeling guilty about it afterwards.
Right, but so many people I think have trouble throwing away food,
That's
right?
true.
Because and so my patients will tell me that because I'll tell them to do these sorts of things too, and I'll do that. Like I said, that's my strategy. Like if we have a birthday cake or something, and then we have leftover birthday cake, from a party. Otherwise, it sits there all week and you just eat it.
True.
Like,
True.
every night you just have a piece of cake, and that's not necessarily what you want to do. You want to have it on the birthday, but
That's
then
true.
you want it. So I say, well, give it away to people, like make sure you give it away at the
Yeah,
party.
I mean, I'm always against throwing away food, but I think it's a difficult situation and it's a difficult thing to do because even traditionally coming from India, whatever, we don't throw away food. We just try to use every bit of it, and I don't believe in throwing away food. So I what I say is that buy the right food to begin with. But hey, if you did buy the wrong food, then you have to decide what to do with it, either throw
Well,
away or
and
give it away or whatever, because otherwise it's going to have a detrimental effect on your health.
yeah, and I think too, for some of the things that we enjoy, they're not really food, right? I mean, these are
That's true.
enjoyment things that we're mostly like a cookie. Is it really food? I mean, we don't really need it. It's not like we're
Mm.
throwing away broccoli or something, right? Like
Yeah, that's true.
it's really in an enjoyment thing, and we should enjoy our food. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we should enjoy our, I think that's a key factor is mindfulness and really enjoying what you're eating and not trying to deprive yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you deprive yourself, then that craving kind of builds up and you just overdo it. So I think you should still pander to your cravings, but you should do it in small doses.
Yes, and find something. You can sometimes find things that are better, right? Like I will get like dark chocolate pieces that are individually wrapped, because
Yeah.
I know that I like some chocolate, but I won't eat like if I have, something else like Reese's peanut butter cups, I would eat like a whole
Oh yeah.
bag that
Of
just eat
course.
them.
Of
But
course.
like if I have dark chocolate pieces, I can even dip them in a little bit of peanut butter
Right.
and eat that, and that's so much. But I'll only have one, and it's just not as.
Yeah, and that's what I used to do was actually I wouldn't just bite on it. I would just leave it in my mouth, let it melt.
Mhm.
And after a while you just feel very satisfied. So you
Yeah,
don't need to eat the whole bar of chocolate either. You just eat a
yeah.
small piece of it and you're very satisfied by the end of it.
That's what we teach patients with mindful eating, doing that mindful eating exercise where you take the chocolate and you smell the chocolate and you really experience the chocolate and, put it in your mouth, let it sit there, right? Because that, again, gives you that sort of, it makes you like it so much more.
That's all we have time for. Thank you so much, Angela, for sharing your story and inspiring people. And thank you, everyone, for listening in.
Thank you.
If you've had success in weight loss and are willing to share your story, please reach out to me at host@decodingobesity.com. I'll see you all next time.
You've been listening to the Decoding Obesity podcast. Please remember, the information in this podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever. The thoughts and opinions expressed on this podcast are solely of the host and his guests and do not constitute medical advice. Views and opinions on this show do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of any organization. And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you so much for listening in. Don't forget to visit our website, www.decodingobesity.com, for show notes and more info. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please feel free to rate, review, and subscribe on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate that effort. Until next time.